What happens when Hollywood's most beloved and humble star finally reaches his breaking point on live television? What unfolded on The View was explosive, all triggered when Joy Behar crossed a line that should never have been crossed. This confrontation has everyone talking. By the end of this video, you'll understand why. Keanu Reeves, the man who rarely loses his cool, snapped on national TV. Make sure to hit subscribe and drop a comment. Because this story is intense, the day began like any other episode of The View. The familiar theme music played, the audience applauded, and the co-hosts took their seats around the iconic table. Joy Behar, as usual, was ready with her sharp tongue and controversial takes. But she didn't expect her guest, Keanu Reeves, to be the one who wouldn't just sit there and take it. Keanu walked onto the set with his calm demeanor, wearing a simple black suit and that gentle smile that has charmed millions worldwide. The audience erupted in applause as he approached the guest chair, waving modestly and taking a seat with the grace of someone who's done countless interviews. "Welcome to The View, Keanu," Whoopi Goldberg said warmly as the applause died down. "It's great to have you here." "Thank you for having me," Keanu replied softly and genuinely. "It's a pleasure to be here with all of you." The interview began smoothly. They discussed his latest film, his passion for motorcycles, and his well-known acts of kindness. Keanu answered each question thoughtfully and humbly, never trying to steal the spotlight. But Joy Behar had been unusually quiet during these early minutes, and anyone who knew her knew that silence meant she was preparing something big. She sat with her familiar smirk, tapping her pen against her notes, waiting for her moment. "You know, Keanu," Joy suddenly interjected, cutting off a story he was telling about working with young actors, "I have to ask you something that's been bothering me." The room's energy shifted. The other co-hosts exchanged glances, and Keanu turned his full attention to Joy, his expression pleasant but focused. "Of course," he said simply. "What would you like to know?" Joy leaned forward, her predatory smile spreading. "Well, you've built this image as the humble, generous actor who gives away millions and helps strangers, but is any of it real? Or is it all just the most elaborate PR campaign in Hollywood history?" The studio fell silent. Even the audience seemed to hold its breath. This wasn't a typical question on The View, especially not for someone as universally loved as Keanu Reeves. Keanu's expression didn't change dramatically, but those who knew him could see the slight tightening around his eyes, the subtle shift in posture. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "Could you clarify what you mean by that?" Joy didn't back down. "Oh, come on, Keanu. You're telling me a Hollywood actor, someone who's made hundreds of millions, is genuinely selfless, that your modesty isn't just another performance?" The other hosts looked uncomfortable. Whoopi cleared her throat, wanting to steer the conversation elsewhere. But Joy continued, her voice sharper. "Normal people don't have photographers following them when they do good deeds. Normal people don't have acts of kindness go viral. Forgive me if I'm skeptical of St. Keanu." Keanu paused, processing. When A spoke, his voice was still controlled, but harder. "Joy, I understand skepticism is part of your job, but I think you're crossing into territory that's not just unfair, it's cruel." "Cruel?" Joy load. "I'm asking legitimate questions that journalists should ask. You want cruel. Cruel is manipulating emotions for profit. Cruel is building a fake persona to sell movie tickets." Something shifted in Keanu's eyes. The man who had remained calm through decades of tragedy, who had faced unimaginable loss with grace, was reaching his limit. "You want to talk about manipulation, Joy?" Keanu's voice was quiet but heavy, making everyone lean forward. "Let's talk about manipulation." Keanu Reeves, who had avoided confrontation for decades, now stared directly at Joy Behar with an intensity that made the studio hold its breath. "You sit at this table every day," he continued, his voice gaining strength, "and you tear people down for entertainment. You take someone's genuine attempt to do good and twist it into something cynical because that gets ratings, doesn't it, Joy?" Joy's smirk faltered slightly, but she didn't retreat. "I'm a journalist, Keanu. I ask hard questions. If you can't handle that, Maybe you shouldn't do interviews. Hard questions. Keanu leaned forward, his calm exterior cracking. Ask me about the work. Ask me about the craft. Ask about the stories we're trying to tell. But don't question whether my grief is real, whether my desire to help people is genuine, whether the loss of my best friend, my daughter, my sister made me a better person or just a better actor. The mention of personal loss shocked the panel. Even Joyce seemed momentarily taken aback, but she recovered quickly. Now you're being dramatic, she said. I never mentioned your personal tragedies. I'm talking about your public image, your brand. There's a difference. No, Joy, there isn't, Keanu said, his voice rising. You can't separate the two when you attack someone's character, when you call kindness fake, when you suggest generosity is calculated. You're attacking everything they are. You're telling the world that goodness doesn't exist, that every decent act must have an ulterior motive. Sonny, a co-host, tried to intervene. Maybe we should know, Keanu said firmly, his eyes fixed on Joy. Let her finish. She clearly has more to say about my supposed manipulation. Please, Joy, enlighten us all about how helping a stranded motorist change a tire is a publicity stunt. Tell us how giving my Matrix salary to the crew was just good business. Explain how privately paying for cancer treatments for friends is somehow calculated marketing. Joy's face was reddening, her voice rising. You see, this is exactly what I'm talking about. You've got a list ready. You know which good deeds to mention when challenged. That's not genuine kindness. That's crisis management. The audience murmured, some visibly uncomfortable. But Keanu wasn't done. You want to know what crisis management looks like, Joy? Keanu stood, catching everyone off guard. Crisis management is when someone like you is called out for being unnecessarily cruel on national television and, instead of apologizing, instead of showing an ounce of decency, you double down and attack harder. That's crisis management. I am not being cruel, Joy insisted, her voice less confident than before. I'm being realistic. I'm being honest. Honest? Keanu laughed sharply, a sound none had heard from him before. You want honest. Here's honest. You're not a journalist, Joy. Journalists seek truth. You seek controversy. You don't care about facts. You care about reactions. You don't want to inform people. You want to upset them because upset people keep watching, and watching people make you money. Whoopi tried again. Keanu, maybe we can... No, Whoopi, with all due respect, I'm not finished. Keanu turned back to Joy, now shifting uncomfortably in her seat. You want to question my motives? Fine. Let's question yours. How much of your salary comes from creating drama? How much of your career is built on tearing down people who can't fight back? And when someone finally does, when someone calls you out for what you really are, you hide behind the label of journalist as if it gives you permission to be heartless. Joy's face was red, her knuckles white from gripping her pen. How dare you lecture me about journalism? You're an actor. You pretend to be other people for a living. And you pretend to be a decent human being for a living. Keanu shot back without hesitation. At least I'm honest about what I do being pretend. The studio was silent. Cameras rolling, but everyone frozen by the intensity. This wasn't the Keanu Reeves the world knew. This was someone finally pushed too far. Joy tried to regain control. You know what, Keanu? You're proving my point perfectly. The mask is coming off now, isn't it? The real you is coming out. And it's not nearly as nice as you pretend to be. Keanu's voice dropped to a near whisper, yet carried more power than shouting. The real me, Joy, is someone who has buried more people than anyone should have to. The real me wakes up every day choosing to make the world a little better instead of worse. The real me believes kindness matters, helping people matters, treating others with dignity and respect matters. And the real you just spent 10 minutes on national television trying to convince people none of those things are real. The words hit Joy like a physical blow. For the first time, she seemed speechless. The woman who always had a comeback now sat with her mouth slightly open, staring at a man who had stripped away every defense. But Keanu wasn't finished. The floodgates opened, decades of restraint pouring out. You know what's truly tragic? Joy. Keanu continued, his quiet voice cutting like a blade. You could use your platform for something meaningful. You could lift people up. You could ask questions that matter, that help people understand the world better. But instead, you choose to be a bully, and not just any bully, a bully with a microphone and an audience of millions. Joy finally found her voice, shakier than before. I am not a bully. I ask tough questions. If you can't handle the heat, stop. Keanu's single word carried quiet authority that made Joy stop mid. Just stop. You've said enough. Actually, you said enough about 5 minutes ago. But you kept going because that is what you would do. You don't know when to stop. You don't know when you've crossed the line from journalism into cruelty, from skepticism into character assassination. Sonny tried once more to defuse the situation. Maybe we should take a commercial break. No, Keanu said firmly, still looking at Joy. We're finishing this conversation right here, right now, because the people watching deserve to see how this ends. They deserve to see what happens when someone finally calls out the playground bully. Joy's defensive anger returned. Playground bully? Are you kidding me? I'm doing my job. I'm holding celebrities accountable. I'm asking the questions that need to be asked. Whose questions? Joy. Keanu's voice grew stronger, more passionate. Who exactly is demanding that you question whether kindness is real? Who is asking you to tear down people who try to do good in the world? Because I'll tell you who's not asking for that. The people who benefit from that kindness. The crew who could send their kids to college because I shared my salary. The cancer patients who got treatment because someone cared. The stranded families who got home safely because someone stopped to help. None of them are asking you to question whether that help was genuine. But the public has a right to know. Joy started to respond, but Keanu cut her off. The public has a right to know the truth, not your cynical interpretation. The public has a right to accurate information, not your bitter commentary masquerading as journalism. The public has a right to see good happening in the world without someone immediately declaring it fake. The other hosts exchanged glances, uncomfortable but powerless. This was television history in the making. Joy made a final attempt. You know what, Keanu? You're having this emotional outburst because you know I'm right. You're angry because someone finally saw through your act. That was the moment. Keanu, who had remained calm through decades of loss and pain, finally exploded. Exposed. His voice boomed through the studio. You want to talk about being exposed? Let's talk about what you've exposed today. Joy. You've exposed yourself as someone so miserable, so bitter, so incapable of believing that good exists, that you tear down anyone who proves you wrong. Joy tried to interrupt. Keanu wasn't having it. No, you've had your turn to talk, to attack, to question, to tear down. Now, it's my turn. His voice, loud but controlled, continued. You've exposed yourself as someone who thinks cynicism is intelligence, cruelty is courage. Tearing people down is the same as building yourself up. You've shown everyone that you would rather destroy something beautiful than admit beauty can exist. The studio was electric. The audience silent, shocked. This wasn't the Keanu Reeves they knew, but it was exactly the Keanu Reeves they needed to see. And you know what else you've exposed? Joy? Keanu's voice dropped to that dangerously quiet level. You've exposed that you're the kind of person who makes good people want to stop being good. You're the voice in people's heads saying, don't help that stranger. People will think you're showing off. You're the reason people hesitate to be generous. Joy was visibly shaken. She made one final attempt. This is rich, coming from someone having a complete meltdown on live television. Is this the real Keanu Reeves? Keanu stood fully, towering over the panel. His voice was steady, but filled the studio. You're right, Joy. This is the real me. Someone who has spent his life trying to be kind, helping others, making the world a little better, and who finally reached his limit. When faced with someone determined to convince the world that kindness is a lie, someone who has lost everyone he's loved and still chooses to love, someone who has been knocked down more times than anyone should and still gets up every day trying to lift others, and yes, someone who finally got angry when confronted by a person whose job seems to be making sure no one else gets lifted up. Paused, looking around at the other hosts, then back at Joy, smaller in her chair. You wanted the real me, Joy? I believe the world has enough people tearing each other down and needs more building each other up. I believe when you have a platform, an audience, influence, you have a responsibility to use it for good. And I believe what you did today, what you do regularly, is the opposite of good. The silence stretched. Joy opened her mouth several times, but nothing came out. The other hosts were frozen. The audience was still. Finally, Keanu picked up his jacket. I think I'm done here, he said quietly. Thank you for having me. I hope the people watching got something valuable, even if it wasn't what anyone expected. He started to walk away, then turned back to Joy one last time. And Joy, I hope someday you find whatever it is you're looking for by tearing others down, because from where I'm standing, it doesn't look like it's making you very happy. Keanu walked off the set. The studio remained in stunned silence. The cameras kept rolling, capturing Joy Behar. Speechless, while the man she tried to expose revealed something far more uncomfortable, the reality of her own approach to the world. What did you think of this confrontation? Was Joy Behar out of line, or just doing her job? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more stories like this.